back to the Cambridge Economics series. Today, topic 4, the macroeconomy, the heaviest topic in this entire syllabus. 4 ideas: how a whole economy's income actually gets measured, and the basic circular flow model behind it. The single diagram that describes an entire economy at once, and the most persistent mistake found anywhere in this research. Economic growth and unemployment, the two most talked about measures of how an economy is actually performing, and price stability, what inflation really costs, and the 2 different things that can cause it. Real examiner findings, a real exam question, and real time to think before every answer. Let's start with how economists actually measure the size of an economy. Before you can study a whole economy, you need a way to measure it, how much income it actually generates, and a basic model of how that income actually flows between the people and institutions inside it. Here's a documented finding on adjusting one measure of national income into another. Question 16 required candidates to identify why NNI would be less than GNI. The standard difference between the 2 terms is net depreciation. It was surprising that only 37% of candidates chose the correct option. Here's a second finding on the circular flow of income itself, reserved from this series' very first video, since it turned out richer than expected. Most candidates were unable to correctly distinguish between a closed and open economy, with many suggesting wrongly that government was not present in a closed economy. Here is your exam-level question. Explain the difference between GNI and NNI. What has to be subtracted to get from one to the other? Then explain why a closed economy still includes government in its circular flow of income model. What actually makes an economy closed? Here is the solution. NNI is GNI minus depreciation, the wear and tear on a nation's capital stock. GNI counts the gross value of income. NNI is the net figure once you've accounted for capital that simply needs replacing, not genuinely growing the economy. And a closed economy still includes government spending and taxation. Being closed specifically means there's no trade with the rest of the world, no exports or imports crossing the model's boundary. Not that government disappears from the picture. Households, firms, and government all still interact in a closed economy. It's only the international sector that's missing. A single market has its own demand and supply curves. An entire economy needs its own diagram entirely. Aggregate demand and aggregate supply. And one mistake here trips up more candidates than any other single confusion found anywhere in this research. Here's the most persistent mistake found in this entire research pass, corroborated independently across 6 separate examination series. Some incorrectly labeled the axes as price rather than price level. Others labeled the curves as D and S rather than as AD and AS. An ordinary microdiagram drawn where a whole economy diagram was actually required. Here's a second finding on what a policy for the whole economy actually shifts. Fiscal and monetary policy were often discussed as a means of increasing AS and not AD. Here is your exam-level question. Explain why an AD-AS diagram needs its own axis labels and its own curve names. What's wrong with labeling it like an ordinary demand and supply diagram? Then, for a policy that changes the overall level of spending in an economy, explain specifically which curve it shifts and why fiscal and monetary policy are so often wrongly linked to the wrong one. Here is the solution. An AD-AS diagram plots the price level against real output, not price against the quantity of one product. And the curves are AD and AS, not D and S. Labeling it like an ordinary microdiagram misses that this model describes the whole economy at once, not one market. And fiscal and monetary policy, government spending, taxation, interest rates, change the total level of planned spending in the economy, which shifts aggregate demand, not aggregate supply. Aggregate supply shifts instead from changes on the production side, like costs, technology, or the size of the workforce. Confusing which side a policy actually affects means drawing the right diagram but shifting the wrong curve. 2 topics down. how national income is measured, and the single diagram that describes an entire economy at once. A closed economy still has a government in it. Being closed just means no trade with the rest of the world. An ordinary demand and supply diagram used where an aggregate demand and aggregate supply diagram was actually needed. The most repeated mistake found anywhere in this research. Two topics left: economic growth and unemployment, and price stability. What inflation actually costs and what actually causes it. Economic growth and unemployment are the two figures politicians and newspapers talk about more than almost any other measure of how an economy is actually performing. Here's a documented finding on two different kinds of growth. An emphasis on actual, often short-run economic growth because of increases in AD, rather than potential, long-run economic growth due to increases in LRAS. Here's a second finding on measuring unemployment. Some candidates did not focus on the question asked and wrote instead on the different methods that could be used to measure unemployment when the question specifically asked about the difficulties in measuring it. Here is your exam-level question. Explain the difference between actual economic growth and potential economic growth, and which one an increase in aggregate demand alone can actually deliver. Then explain the real difference between measuring unemployment and identifying the difficulties in measuring it. Why doesn't just describing how unemployment is measured answer a question about measurement difficulties? Here is the solution. Actual economic growth is a short-run rise in real output, often from an increase in aggregate demand using up spare capacity that already exists. It's a movement, not a shift outward. Potential economic growth is a genuine increase in the economy's maximum capacity itself, which needs an outward shift in long-run aggregate supply. More or better resources, not just using existing ones more fully. An increase in AD alone can only ever deliver actual growth up to the limit of existing capacity. It cannot shift LRAS outward by itself, and difficulties in measuring unemployment are the real practical problems with a measurement. Undercounting discouraged workers, missing the informal economy, and so on. Not simply a description of the different measurement methods that exist. Explaining how something is measured isn't the same as explaining why that measurement is imperfect. Inflation is more than just rising prices. It has a real cost that depends on exactly how fast prices rise compared to everything else in the economy, and it can come from two genuinely different directions. Here's a documented finding, verified against the actual exam question. An interest rate of 14% against inflation of 48.7%. Very few candidates had any real understanding of what is meant by or how to calculate real interest rates. The majority gained 0 marks. Here's a second finding on identifying the right type of inflation. An additional problem was a misidentification of the type of inflation, usually identified as demand pull. Answers that showed both demand pull and cost push inflation received 0 marks. Here is your exam-level question. For an interest rate of 14% and inflation of 48.7%, calculate the real interest rate and explain what a negative real interest rate actually means. Then, for a labor shortage pushing up wages and costs, explain which type of inflation this causes and why it's so often misidentified as the other type. Here is the solution. The real interest rate is the nominal interest rate minus the rate of inflation. 14% minus 48.7% is minus 34.7%. A real interest rate, this negative, means that even while earning 14% in nominal terms, money is actually losing purchasing power far faster than that interest can keep up with. Savers are losing real wealth. And a labor shortage pushing up wages and costs is cost-push inflation. Inflation driven by rising costs of production, shifting aggregate supply to the left, not demand-pull inflation, which comes from excess demand outstripping supply. The two get confused because both raise the price level, but cost push starts on the supply side of the economy and demand pull starts on the demand side. 4 topics: national income statistics and the circular flow, aggregate demand and aggregate supply, economic growth and unemployment, and price stability. Notice the thread running through today's mistakes. An entire economy behaves differently from a single market, and the tools for describing it, the right diagram, the right curve, the right side of a calculation, have to match that scale. Get the framework right, and the rest follows. Next time. Government macroeconomic intervention. What governments actually do when growth, unemployment, or inflation move in the wrong direction. Search Cambridge Economics on StudyRevise for the rest of this series, and I'll see you in the next one.